Welcome to Week 10 on the Coach Poe Show. I'm your host, Coach Poe, and we have a great show lined up for you tonight. I've got two really fantastic guests that we're going to sit here and talk the first regional rankings of the season that are actually numbered, not alphabetical, but numbered. And we're going to talk about games this week that are going to impact conference championship games. I am joined this week by Chuck Bitner and Kris Ferguson. Welcome on, guys.
Good to be here.
What's going on?
Well, guys, this is I can't believe we're at week 10 already and, talking about it. But, we had our first regional rankings that are ranked numerically. And we have games right now this week for conference championships. And we still have a lot of games that are going to impact those conference championships and probably impact these regional rankings as we start looking forward.
Yeah, without a doubt. The regional rankings is, when we get those first 1 through 10 rankings, it's always really interesting because there's always going to be a few tells in there, right? Like what does the committee really value this year? Like how are they comparing these teams? So, we got the alphabetical list last week, but that doesn't really tell us anything. So the 1 to 10 rankings really do kind of give us that first indication of what's the criteria that seems to carry the most weight. And I think what I'm always most concerned with or want to look at is, are we consistent across the regions, or are they maybe applying that criteria a little bit differently in each one of the regions? So we can get into that if you like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would just say that, when we talked about this last week, there was a lot more drama in rankings than there probably were this week. And I think that just shows that, like, even 7 games in, there's just so many consequential games that are left to play.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to really put stock into kind of where things were in week 7 going into week 8. So I think just seeing the rankings and continuing to let things play out really just it's kind of nice to just marvel kind of how things move from week to week.
Without a doubt. And I'm excited y'all are here. So let's dive into this thing. Let's take a look at those regional rankings, guys. And so as you can see here, we have it up on the screen. We got Benedict at 1, Delta State at 2, Valdosta State 3, West Florida is at 4, Lenoir-Rhyne 5, Mars Hill 6, Fayetteville State 7, West Georgia is 8, Fort Valley 9, and Virginia Union is 10. I'm gonna ask both of y'all, what is your biggest takeaway from these rankings that we see right here? Chuck, you go first.
I think the biggest thing is West Florida obviously getting some credit for strength of schedule. That was definitely the biggest one. When I kind of swagged this out last Sunday morning, I had West Florida down in 6th, and I had Lenoir-Rhyne and Mars Hill above them, based on the records and also the strength of schedule. I thought, at least for Lenoir-Rhyne, I thought 8-1 against Division II competition is going to look a good bit better than 6-2. But the committee obviously really felt that West Florida's strength of schedule carried a lot of weight, and I think we saw that with West Georgia as well, because I have West Georgia down in 10th to possibly not even being on the page. So I think for me that was the biggest takeaway with this was the strength of schedule really carrying a lot of weight for those Gulf South teams.
Kris, what about you? When you look at this, what stands out? What is kind of your light bulb there as you look at this?
Well, a couple of things. The first one being the strength of the Gulf South in general. When you see the top 4 teams in there, and again, some of them are in a kind of a round robin type of competition to finish the season. So just continuing to see that, West Florida not really getting punished really heavily for losing to another Gulf South team really stands out here, as opposed to Lenoir-Rhyne's loss and how they, probably were like a 1 or a 2, and now they're behind 3 Gulf South teams. I think that really just stands out. I think the other piece of this is just the number of HBCUs in the mix. With Benedict, Fayetteville, and Fort Valley, Virginia Union. I mean, that's a lot. And I think as 2 conferences, the CIAA has routinely had 2 teams sort of in the mix towards the top of the conference, and the SIAC has been a little bit more hit or miss until last year. And so now you see that even they've got 2 teams in the hunt for playoff spots. And I think that just really speaks to kind of how far those conferences have come with scheduling and also performance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's actually even a name to put out there that's not on the page yet, Chris, and that's Virginia State.
Yeah.
They're not there, and it simply is just because of strength of schedule. Like I put up my column this evening, and kind of addressed that a little bit because I know that's a fair question to ask. Well, why is Virginia Union so low at 8-1, and Virginia State's not even on the page at 8-1? I mean, come on, those records are really good. It just comes down to the strength of schedule, and that's kind of why I led with that, looking at how those Gulf South teams got a lot of credit for the strength of schedule, and unfortunately, it's hurting Virginia Union and Virginia State because of the all 165 teams in the country, they're like in the bottom 10 in strength of schedule. So obviously, they get a bit of a flip this week. They're going to help each other get a bump, and then the winner is going to get Fayetteville State, who has a good record. So, Virginia State's not in the page right now. They're not in the mix right now, but they're definitely still alive for this. If they win the next 2 games, they're going to be in the playoffs.
Well, and I think too, Virginia State had this opportunity. They actually beat Tusculum, so I think they're also Pioneer fans going into this week as well.
Absolutely, guys, and that's a great point. And I think you said it earlier too, Chuck. When you look at this, I look at games in the next 2 weeks, and we're talking conference, last week before conference championships and conference championship games potentially. This is going to be completely different. And there's a lot of teams that we see on the screen right now that there's probably going to be 1 or 2 for sure that will not be on this list when we set the playoff field here in a couple weeks. And we know that. So what we see right here, it is so important, is to continue winning, continue beating, the teams that are on your schedule, and I think that's really, really important. We have some really big games coming up this weekend, and that leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. So, because I'm with you guys, I think the thing that stuck out to me was the West Florida being so high. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be, but a 2-loss team that high up, I think it shows you what the committee was looking at. And obviously we're not in those rooms, we're not in those meetings, so we don't really know how that tallies up and what their points of contention are. But when you look at this, there's some really, really good teams, and we see it across all the other super regions. There's going to be some really good teams left home at the end of the day when this thing is all done and settled.
Yeah, and to the point that I was trying to make a little bit earlier about consistency across the regions, it's one of the things that I like to try to see is, are we applying the criteria in the same way? Are we putting emphasis on the same variables across the regions? And so here we're really looking at strength of schedule. If you look at Super Region 3, the MIAA teams really got the benefit of the doubt with the strength of schedule and the strength of that conference for sure. Whereas in Super Region 1, which is kind of my home region, they didn't really look so much at strength of schedule. They really went by records, and they kind of grouped the 0-loss teams, the 1-loss teams, and the 2-loss teams, and they kind of ranked them within those groups. And I don't really have a problem with them doing it that way at this point, because in that region particularly, there are a lot of games to be played that are going to impact how this all shakes out.
Yeah.
So I don't really have a problem with them approaching it that way. But we definitely did see across the regions, they were emphasizing some different things in different parts of the country.
Sure. Well, guys, enough about the regional rankings. We see them every week. We dive into it. We kind of look at these until we're, blue in the face. But guys, as we start looking at it now, I look at games this weekend that are ultimately going to impact that list, ultimately going to impact kind of, the national playoff landscape. And I think there's a couple games that really stand out to me, and I think stand out to you guys as well. I'm going to say the first game that stands out to me is Virginia Union, Virginia State. And Chris, I know this is right in your wheelhouse, and you cover these two teams pretty heavily. Tell us about that game. What are your thoughts on that as we start looking at the playoffs and conference championship implications?
Well, the first thing that kind of stands out is that these are 2 ranked teams, at least from the AFCA, the coaches poll perspective, and Virginia State's kind of just been looming outside of the top 25. From a D2Football.com poll. One thing that truly stands out in this game is just these are 2 teams that are not really separated by a lot of distance. There's definitely a lot of respect and admiration for both of them. But when it's all said and done, somebody's got to go to the championship game, and it can't get any higher stakes than that. And these are the 2 teams that are left in the CIAA North. For Virginia Union, can they keep pressure off of the run game? They kind of running a 2 quarterback system right now. Normally, they say if you got two quarterbacks, you don't have one. And here they've got two quarterbacks that kind of have like a little bit different styles, but they do just enough to keep pressure off of Jada Byers, who had been out for a few games, but probably still is one of the top Division II running backs in the country. And they have a stable. Is not just him. There's other running backs that do really well in that system. So and then Virginia Union is actually like tops in like rushing defense in the country, and so does that force Virginia State to be very one dimensional when they like to do a lot of like RPO style plays. So if you're Virginia State, one of the things that certainly looking at is that the injuries are certainly mounted for them. So actually, their starting quarterback right now was the second string, and he was a starter last year in Jordan Davis. And they've got a plethora of wide receivers as well, but their offensive line's banged up, and they are going against that very very good defensive line for Virginia Union. So it's certainly a lot to watch for. You just never know how rivalry games will truly play out. Will the better team win, or will it become more of luck? It's better to be lucky than be good.
Yeah.
It's a lot to really look into, and that's what makes this matchup really, really intriguing.
So, Chris, I want to ask you about Jada Byers, the running back for Virginia Union. So, for anybody that's going to join the broadcast for this, maybe outside the region, outside the CAA, who's curious about this because it is our game of the week, he's going to be the player that people recognize, the name that people know. So, in the last couple of weeks, it kind of looks like Virginia Union has been very careful with how they've used him. A limited number of carries the last couple of games. But if I go back 2 weeks to when they played at Bowie State, we really do see the impact that he has and the way he can change a game. So, what are your thoughts on where Jada Byers is from a health perspective? Is he fully healthy, ready to go? Do you think we'll see him fully deployed this weekend?
Chris must be having some internet issues, Chuck. See if we get.
Well, I thought actually that was me. So I
No,
was
you're
gonna
good.
wait and see if I could.
He's
stop him
back.
Oh, there he is. He's back. Okay, so that was me.
My bad, guys. Internet, technology these days.
It's all
Well, Chris,
good, bro.
tell us a little bit. I'll shorten the question just to make sure you got all of it. Tell us a little bit about Jada Byers. It looks like Virginia Union has kind of been very careful with the way they've used him the last couple of weeks. Was really a huge factor a couple of weeks ago at Bowie State, but it looks like in the last couple of games they were really careful. What do you expect from him this weekend against Virginia State?
Well, Jada Byers. So last year, low context, Jada Byers was actually the top all-purpose and top running back in terms of yards rushed in Division II. He actually was out for a couple of games this year, so his numbers don't look anywhere close to where they were. But when Jada Byers got going again, all of a sudden you start seeing 200 plus yard rushing games again. And Virginia Union has a little bit of a luxury because they have the opportunity. I think they've been using, like Curtis Allen, who's like the number two back, who's also rushed for like almost 200 yards in a game when Byers was out. They've started using him a little bit more, just to reduce the wear and tear. I mean, Virginia Union is a run first team. They are a traditional, like, to me, CIAA team in run first, where a lot of other teams this year have actually been able to pass the ball very well. So, I think that that's probably more of a, reduce the wear and tear on him, and use the depth that they have to kind of wear some teams down. And if you also think about the fact that like they went up against Lincoln, who was much more improved, right? But they shut Lincoln out, and they were just putting up scores in bunches. And you don't really need to use Byers in a game like that very much when you're scoring like that. So I just think that when you think about this game, he's probably going to get a lot of carries. You think about if they make it to the championship game against Fayetteville State, they've got a lot up against a defense that only has allowed, less than 15 points a game. And they're going to, be probably using him in very heavy doses as well. And the lack of a bye week, right? So trying to kind of manage his workload it seems to be one of the priorities of the coaching staff to get ready for, games that really truly matter now.
And I think that's a great point, Chris. You definitely try to slow play that a little bit, particularly with a guy like a Jada Byers, who you're going to have to rely on down the stretch here, down these very, very important next couple of games, because he's going to be a pivotal part to that offense. You're going to need him as you kind of build to not just this week in the conference championships, but if you want to make that playoff run, we need him to be healthy. So that is for sure. So I guess the next game to me that kind of stands out, and I'm going to bounce this one to you a little bit, Chuck, because it's your old stomping grounds. Mars Hill is going to travel to Tusculum, and that game is going to decide the Mountain Division. And so that's a big game, I think, in that side of the bracket, in the South Atlantic Conference. We know that Mars Hill is I don't want to say the favorite team, but they've kind of been atop that Mountain Division all season long. And now they have to go on the road and win it in a very difficult place to play at Tusculum.
Yeah, well, we're kind of lucky as those of us who follow the SAC to kind of get it to come down like this, where you essentially have a championship game before the championship game.
Yeah.
It's really exciting just the way they kind of fell with the schedule. But it's really kind of looked that way for the last couple of years because Mars Hill and Tusculum have kind of just been the best teams in that division.
Yeah.
Even before we formed the divisions, just the way things have gone the last couple of years, they've kind of been the best teams among those groups that make up the Mountain Division. And it's kind of interesting because I think Mars Hill has clearly been the best team all year long in that division. And Tusculum's been a bit up and down. They had a slow start. They lost the first two games. Had a little bit of trouble finding some footing offensively, which that's not a new struggle for them. Like they've had some problems finding consistency on offense over the years, but had a slow start. But here they are, getting into the last couple of weeks of the season, and they have a chance to go play for a championship. So that's a pretty exciting place for them to be. And realistically, one of their losses is an FCS game, so that doesn't count in the standings. So, if I'm Jerry Odom, I'm telling my guys, hey, if we win these next two games, we're going to win the SAC championship. We have a shot to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know how realistic that is for them to get into the playoffs, but, we kind of have seen that the committees have kind of given teams that play in championship games a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, both on the winning side and the losing side. So, I'm definitely going to sell that to my players if I'm on that coaching staff that, we've got a lot to play for here, even beyond just our conference championship. So, I think that maybe gives them a little bit of an advantage to play a little bit loose. It kind of feels like a game where there's more for Mars Hill to lose than there is for Tusculum to lose.
Without a doubt. Agree 100%. I think there's a lot more pressure on a Mars Hill than on a Tusculum because, like you said, Tusculum has nothing to lose. I don't know whether they were wrote off or whatever, but right now they could, like you said, if they win this week, they're going to host the conference championship game, and then what? And then what happens? You go out there and win that game. Right. So for Mars Hill, you handled your business. You've had one slip up against earlier this year, but you've handled your business, and now you've got to go on the road to could be a hostile place to play. And I think that pressure falls back onto Mars Hill a little bit.
Yeah, all that said, we can talk about some of the psychological aspects of it and all that, but I do think Mars Hill is just the better football team.
Yeah.
I think they're a little bit more complete. On a good day, Tusculum can be a very difficult team to tangle with. Like if they get the offense going, we know that they'll have a lot of defense to bring to the fight. So on their home field, they can be a very difficult team. On any given day, they're good enough to beat any team in the SAC. But I do think Mars Hill is the better football team here. And they're also a team that I think has just done a really good job of just steadily improving week to week. I think if I look at every team in the South Atlantic Conference this year, Justin, I think if you look at the trajectory that they've been on, they get better every game. The offense has been very impressive to me this year, even with some new talent on that side of the ball.
Right.
They've been very impressive to me. So I'm definitely favoring Mars Hill in this. I'm not going to count out Tusculum by any means, but I'm favoring Mars Hill for the win in this game.
I agree, Chuck. I think it's hard to and both teams have had quarterback, changes this year, just in general, like new quarterbacks under center from last year. And we know how challenging that can be. But I would say I agree with you. I think Marcel had to replace some pieces on offense. They've been able to do that. And I think they are a more complete team. I'm excited to see this one because I think the implications are huge and to host, and they host, right? That the Mountain Division hosts the conference championship game. So, we'll wait and see what that looks like, going into next week, but, very exciting games. And real quick, just want to hit on this game too, because this is, a big game down the Gulf South. Delta State travels to West Georgia this week. Delta State coming off the bye after that loss to West Florida rather. So that's going to be a tough game. That game, again, we talk about the ripple effects in the Gulf South, and they're kind of have a little round robin going. And West Georgia then plays Valdosta State. So that very much, West Georgia's right in the thick of this thing and can really throw some ripples into the Gulf South Conference as we start looking at regional rankings and playoffs.
Well, I don't know what you guys think, but when I saw those rankings, one of the first things that did stand out to me was I feel really good if I'm West Georgia, because there they are in 8th place. That's one spot outside of the playoff positioning, and their last 2 games are Delta State and Valdosta State.
Yep.
So if they win those games, they're in the playoffs. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Yep.
And it's nice to control your own fate. So I feel really good about that if I'm West Georgia.
Yeah.
But I do think that they're likely to be the underdog in both of those games. Maybe not Valdosta. We'll see in a week. But as things stand today, I think that they're the underdog in both of those games. But we'll see. I mean, they've kind of gotten a little bit of a spark on the offense with some changes that they've made. They're getting some better quarterback play. They're getting a lot out of their running game right now. I actually am concerned more about their defense. I was very surprised that they struggled to put Shorter away last week.
Yep.
And we know that Delta State brings just a lot to the table offensively. So I think it'll be a great fight. I think it'll be a great Gulf South Conference battle, but I think that Delta State's got a little too much offense for them. And the fact that Delta State was off last week and had a whole extra week to stew on the loss to West Florida and get prepared for this. Yeah.
And it helps. The bye weeks this late in the season helps to, get those guys rested a little bit going down the stretch here. So for sure, guys, we have a couple minutes left here. Just a couple of your takeaways, just real quick. We'll start with you, Chris. A couple takeaways that you're looking forward to this weekend and some things we might could expect.
Just clearing out of the field. That's the one that, the waters are getting clearer and clearer every week. We've just talked about that gauntlet that West Georgia has to do. And once we go through that, like, to me, the one team that stands out that probably has the easiest road now is West Florida. To me, making sure they don't have any stumbles is kind of something I'm looking forward to. And really, I am looking forward to seeing more John Giles, who is right now the leading receiver in Division II.
Yeah.
So that just really piques my interest as well. Somebody who transferred from Virginia Union.
Gotcha. All right. Chuck, what about you? What are you looking forward to this weekend?
Well, first of all, I would say that, for most of the CIAA and the SIAC, it is their last game of the year because they do not play Week 11 except for the championship games. So we want to say best wishes to all the players and coaches who are, going at it for the last time this weekend. So we want to wish them well. And the fact that we still have a lot of spots in these conference championship games up for grabs, I think is very, very exciting. There's 4 conferences in this region, and 3 of them actually have a conference championship game, and we still have spots up for grabs. So I think that's incredibly exciting. Yeah,
and I know for me, it's kind of what you both have said. I mean, I think it's the seeds to get in those conference championship games because this is what you work for. But it's also the clearing of the regional ranking, so to speak. Teams are going to start to fall from them. Teams are going to climb up, and what does that look like? This is an exciting time of year, so I'll be tuned in looking at that this weekend for sure. So, but well, guys, I appreciate you taking time hopping on the Coach Po Show this week. I appreciate our viewers. Thank you. Like, subscribe to this video, follow us on socials. We really appreciate it. Let us know that you like the content we're putting out, and most importantly, pull up a seat and watch some football this Saturday because it is going to be a phenomenal Saturday in Division II football. As always, enjoy your football Saturdays, and we'll see you next week here on the Coach Po Show.